It started like any ordinary morning in Ridgepoint, Illinois. The mist clung low to the pavement as the town slowly stirred awake. But inside a modest home on the corner of Cedar and 6th, Evelyn Johnson sat quietly, her hands folded, staring at the clock. Her son, Marcus, wasn't home. He always called, even when he had late shifts, even when he was out of town. But today, nothing. At 7 a.m., Evelyn slipped on her church shoes, tied her scarf around her silver curls, and grabbed her wooden cane. She didn't call 911. She didn't panic. She simply walked to the sheriff's station, because that's where Marcus worked. Surely someone there would know. When she arrived, her hands trembled from the morning chill, but her voice was warm and respectful. "Excuse me," she said to the white deputy behind the glass window. "I'm looking for my son. His name is Marcus Johnson. He works here." The deputy didn't even glance up. He was sipping coffee, smirking. "Lady," he finally said, "you think I got time to babysit somebody's grandma?" She blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, I thought maybe." He stood, walked around the desk, and then, in front of a half-dozen laughing officers, he poured a full cup of water over her head. "Maybe that'll wash the crazy off," he said with a chuckle. The room exploded in laughter. But what none of them knew was that the man she was looking for, the one they were mocking, was about to walk through that door. And when he did, everything would change. Forever. The door creaked open. Boots stepped across the linoleum floor. And then, silence. Every laugh, every whisper, every smirk in that room disappeared the moment Sheriff Marcus Johnson walked in. He stood tall, dark uniform crisp, badge gleaming. His presence filled the room like thunder rolling in over the plains. He glanced at the front desk, then froze, his eyes locked on the soaked scarf in his mother's trembling hands, the wet blouse clinging to her thin shoulders, the puddle of water at her feet. He didn't say a word. Not yet. Just took a slow step forward. Then another. And another. His mother turned, startled. Her face lit up. "Oh, Marcus. Thank God." But her voice cracked. She was shivering and heartbroken. Marcus gently reached out and held her arms. "Mom," he said softly. "What happened?" She whispered through chattering teeth. "That man, he poured water on me. He said I was crazy." Marcus turned around. Every officer in the room avoided eye contact. Some looked down. One backed away slowly toward the hallway. But it was too late. Marcus's jaw clenched. He looked straight at the deputy holding the now empty cup, still trying to play it cool, still holding that stupid grin. Marcus stepped forward. "I asked a question," he said. His voice was low, dangerous, final. "What happened here?" The room stayed quiet, but Evelyn didn't. With a quiet resolve, she pointed her finger, right at the man who humiliated her. "That one, baby. He's the one who did it." And just like that, Sheriff Marcus Johnson unclipped his cuffs, stepped forward, and arrested his own deputy. Right there, in front of everyone. The sound of the handcuffs snapped like lightning in the dead silence. Sheriff Marcus Johnson didn't flinch, didn't blink. He turned the deputy around with professional precision, pressing his hands behind his back. "You're under arrest for assault," he said coldly, "and conduct unbecoming of an officer." The deputy finally broke. "Wait, Marcus, come on. It was just a joke." But Marcus wasn't listening. Not anymore. He turned to the other officers. "If anyone else here thinks it's funny to pour water on a 78-year-old woman," he said, his voice calm but icy, "step forward now." No one moved. Evelyn stood quietly beside the front desk, holding her soaked scarf. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The moment was speaking louder than any sermon she'd ever heard. By the time the arrested deputy was walked down the hallway, the whispers had already started. "That's his mom. That was the sheriff's mother? Oh my God." Marcus called for internal affairs, immediately. Then he did something no sheriff in Ridge County had done in decades. He pulled out his phone and called the press. 20 minutes later, local reporters were outside. Microphones, flashbulbs, questions. But Marcus stood tall. He didn't dodge. He didn't spin. He said one thing. "The woman assaulted today was not just my mother. She is a citizen, a human being. This department belongs to the people, and we will rebuild it with dignity or not at all." The mayor was watching. The governor got the call. And within hours, #JusticeForEvelyn was trending on Twitter. But Marcus wasn't chasing headlines. He was just getting started. By noon, the sheriff's station didn't feel like a station anymore. It felt like a storm cloud. Dozens of residents had gathered outside. Black, white, Latino, old, young. Many had heard whispers. Some saw the arrest live on social media. But almost everyone came for one reason. They were tired of pretending Ridgepoint was fine. Inside, Marcus sat behind his desk, still in uniform, still processing the weight of the morning. Then came a knock. It was his assistant, nervous. "Sir, the mayor's on line 1. Again." Marcus picked up the receiver. "Marcus," the mayor said, skipping pleasantries. "I need you to know there are protesters outside. Press is asking questions, and donors are calling me." Marcus leaned back. "Calm. They're not protesters. They're citizens, and they're asking for answers." The mayor's voice sharpened. "I get that, but we have to manage the optics. We can't look like we're losing control." Marcus cut in, his voice measured and firm. "Control was lost the moment your people allowed racism to sit at the front desk of my department." There was silence. Then the mayor asked, "What do you plan to do?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm cleaning house. Background checks. Retraining. And every citizen complaint buried under paperwork. We're reopening them. One by one." The mayor's voice dropped to a whisper. "Marcus, do you have any idea what that'll uncover?" Marcus replied, "I'm counting on it." Outside, the crowd had doubled. A woman held a sign. "My grandmother could have been Evelyn." A teenage boy wore a t-shirt that read, "Our sheriff has a spine." But deep inside the station, something even bigger was happening. A box of sealed misconduct files had just been unlocked. And what was inside would blow the lid off the department's dirty history. The box was old, labeled, "Closed complaints. Do not reopen without chief approval." It had dust thick enough to mark a decade. But Marcus opened it anyway. Inside were 52 manila folders, each one with a name, a date, and a note. Insufficient evidence. But Marcus knew better. He pulled the first one. Latasha Green, age 19, disturbing the peace. But in the margins of the report, a handwritten line. Officer used excessive force. Girl left with fractured wrist. No body cam footage. No disciplinary action. No follow-up. Second file. Carlos Jimenez, 42, resisted arrest. Turns out, Carlos had called the police about a break-in. He ended up bloodied, with broken teeth, in his own driveway. Marcus's hand trembled. He flipped through file after file. Same pattern. Same names. Same cover-ups. A knock on the door. It was Evelyn. She stood there, her scarf freshly dried, holding a warm plate of cornbread wrapped in foil. Marcus looked up, tired. "Mom, you shouldn't be here right now." But Evelyn walked in anyway, set the cornbread on his desk, then sat across from her son. She looked around at the open files, at his furrowed brow, at the pain written all over his face. Then she said something he would never forget. "You were born to fix things, baby. But you don't have to fix them alone." That afternoon, Marcus held a press conference. Not about the deputy, not about his mother, about the files. He lifted the first folder and said, "For every person who thought their voice didn't matter, I hear you now. This department will hear you now." Outside, Evelyn stood in the crowd, hands clasped, watching her son become something more than a sheriff. He was becoming the reckoning Ridgepoint never saw coming. The press conference made headlines. But what happened afterward shook the department from the inside. By morning, there were 3 anonymous envelopes on Sheriff Marcus Johnson's desk. No return address. Just one word scrawled on each. Truth. Inside the first envelope was a printed photo. A black teen handcuffed to a radiator in the back room of the precinct. No charges. No paperwork. The second contained a voice recording. A sergeant mocking Latino detainees using racial slurs during a staff meeting. The third? A typed letter. Single-spaced. Signed only as one of your own who can't stay silent anymore. It detailed a system of cover-ups going back 8 years. Naming names, dates, and even a private group chat where officers joked about teaching certain folks a lesson. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his stomach turning. The rot wasn't just in one officer. It was in the foundation. And if he was going to tear it out, he'd need help. That afternoon, he created a confidential tip line. Whistleblowers. Community members. Anyone could speak. And they did. Hundreds of calls. Dozens of sworn statements. Old cases reopened. New suspensions issued. But not everyone was cheering. At 8:43 p.m. that night, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. "You think you're saving this place. You're burning it down." Another read. Watch your back, Sheriff. Marcus showed the messages to Internal Affairs. Their reply? We've seen worse. They're scared. Keep going. But Evelyn, she knew better. That night, as Marcus sat at her kitchen table, she poured him tea and placed her hand gently over his. Son, when you shake a rotten tree, she said, don't be surprised when the snakes fall out. The town was changing. Marcus had opened the door to truth. But it was Evelyn Johnson who became the town's beating heart. People saw her not as a victim, but as a symbol, a quiet voice that had stood firm in the face of humiliation and still chose grace. So when the Ridgepoint Community Forum invited her to speak, the whole town held its breath. The event was set for Friday night at King's Chapel Hall. Every seat booked. The mayor, reporters, church leaders, and victims' families would be there. But on Thursday morning, Evelyn's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered gently. Hello. A low voice on the other end. You've said enough. Stay home tomorrow night, or we'll make sure you can't stand it all. Click. Silence. Evelyn sat frozen, then slowly hung up the phone. She didn't call Marcus. She didn't panic. She just prayed. But Marcus wasn't blind. He'd already had 2 officers come forward saying someone inside the department was trying to intimidate witnesses. So he called in a favor. By Friday evening, state troopers stood guard outside the forum. Plainclothes officers sat scattered inside. And when Evelyn entered the hall, the entire room rose to their feet. Applause. Cheers. Tears. She stood at the podium in her Sunday best, scarf tied with quiet dignity. Then she spoke. They poured water on me, thinking I was small. But they didn't know I carried the strength of generations. Of my grandmother who cleaned floors so her daughters could dream. Of my son, who now wears a badge that actually means something. The room was silent. You could hear people crying in the back rows. This ain't just about me, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's about what we've let happen, and what we'll never allow again. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Not even Marcus. But outside, in the shadows of the chapel parking lot, a pair of eyes watched her. From the front seat of a black Dodge Charger. Engine running. No plates. He picked up his phone and muttered. She just made this personal. It was 2:17 a.m. The neighborhood was quiet. Streetlights flickered. Crickets whispered across the lawns. But at 132 Willow Lane, a shadow moved. The back gate creaked. A lock snapped. Someone had broken into Evelyn Johnson's home. They weren't there to steal jewelry. They weren't looking for money. No, this was personal. They ransacked her living room. Tossed drawers, flipped bookshelves, shredded photos. And then, they found it. A red leather notebook. It wasn't labeled. No name. No title. But it was Evelyn's. Her journal. Inside were pages and pages of names. Notes she had written over the years. Names of neighbors harassed by police. Stories told over porch steps, during Sunday service, in whispers over cornbread. She had written them down. All of them. Long before Marcus wore a badge. And now, someone had stolen it. At 6:03 a.m., Marcus's phone rang. It was his mother's neighbor, Mrs. Dolores. Marcus, baby, someone broke in. Your mama's okay. Thank the Lord, but her house is a mess. Marcus was out the door in under a minute. When he arrived, Evelyn was sweeping glass from the floor, her hands calm, her face unreadable. He hugged her tight. I should have stationed someone here, he whispered. But Evelyn just smiled, tired but strong. They didn't take anything that matters, baby. They only proved how scared they are. Still, Marcus was boiling. He called his team, dusted for prints, checked cameras on nearby homes. And that night, something unexpected happened. A young officer named Rachel Ortiz knocked on his door. Sir, I think I know who did it. And if I'm right, he's not just a threat to your mom. He's still on our payroll. Marcus froze. He looked her dead in the eyes. Tell me everything. The truth was about to explode. Because someone in uniform had crossed a line. And Marcus wasn't just chasing justice anymore. Now it was personal. Rachel Ortiz had only been on the force for 14 months. Fresh out of the academy. Still called rookie by the older guys. But what she lacked in years, she made up for in grit. And now, she was standing in Sheriff Marcus Johnson's office. Risking her badge to tell the truth. She took a deep breath. I didn't know who to go to. But after what they did to your mother, I can't stay quiet. She slid a flash drive across Marcus's desk. He raised an eyebrow. What's on this? Rachel looked over her shoulder, then leaned in. It's a private group chat. Some of the guys call it blue blood only. They've been using it for years to brag, plan, and threaten. Marcus plugged it in. What he saw chilled him. Photos of suspects beaten and humiliated. Voice memos mocking victims. Screenshots of officer schedules showing who was working when accidents happened. And then, a video. A grainy cell phone recording taken inside the department locker room. One officer, Detective Ron Keller, a 17-year veteran, laughing while holding up something red. Got the old lady's little notebook. She won't be writing any more bedtime stories. Rachel whispered. He's the one who broke into her house. I'm sure of it. He bragged about shutting her up. Said your hero mama wouldn't see the end of the month. Marcus clenched his fists. Keller had been trouble for years, but protected by rank, seniority, and silence. Until now. Rachel, he said, this puts a target on your back. She nodded. I know, but if I lose my job doing the right thing, at least I'll still sleep at night. By morning, an internal sting operation was underway. Keller's locker was seized. His phone was confiscated. And when they confronted him, he smirked. You think you're better than us, Sheriff? You're just a black man playing dress-up. You'll never clean this town. Marcus stared him down. Maybe, but I'll die trying before I let you poison it one more day. Detective Ron Keller sat cuffed in the interrogation room. No lawyer. No apology. Just arrogance. Sheriff Marcus Johnson stood across from him, arms folded. Breaking into my mother's home, stealing her journal, threatening citizens, it's all going to stick. Keller smiled. You think I care about jail time? I won't spend a week inside. Marcus leaned in. You're not getting a deal. Keller's eyes narrowed. I don't want one, but I'll give you something if you can handle it. He slid a manila envelope across the table, one he demanded be retrieved from his car before talking. Inside, bank statements, secret payments, meeting logs, and at the center of it all, Mayor Paul Langston. Marcus froze. The mayor, his former mentor, the man who called him son, the one who championed his appointment. Keller chuckled. You think this town got this way by accident? You think all those files you're digging up were ignored just by us badge boys? The mayor ordered some of them closed. He didn't want the heat during election years. Marcus flipped through the documents. There it was, a payment of $15,000 issued from a slush fund labeled Special Community Initiatives. But the memo line read, Incident Management, Evelyn Johnson, March 2019. Marcus blinked. 3 years ago, his mother had helped a neighbor report police harassment. The case had vanished without a trace. Evelyn never mentioned it again. Now he knew why. Marcus left the room in a storm. He didn't say a word to his team. He just drove straight to City Hall. And when he walked into the mayor's office, Langston was already standing. Marcus, he said with that rehearsed smile. I heard Keller's been causing trouble. Marcus slammed the envelope on his desk. Tell me it's not true. The mayor's smile vanished. A long pause. Then he sat down and whispered, You're not ready for the war you're about to start. Marcus didn't flinch. Then it's time I get ready. Outside City Hall, Evelyn was sitting quietly on a bench. She looked up at her son, saw the fire in his eyes, and gently said, Truth doesn't knock politely, baby. It kicks the damn door in. The next 48 hours were chaos. Sheriff Marcus Johnson began preparing a public report, a full expose of everything. The misconduct files, the group chat, the cover-ups, the mayor's signature on the silencing payments. He knew once it went public, there'd be no turning back. But while he planned for political fallout, he forgot one thing. They'd come after what he loved most. On Sunday morning, Evelyn Johnson didn't show up to church. Not like her. Never missed a Sunday in 40 years. Mrs. Dolores, her neighbor, called Marcus. Baby, something's wrong. I knocked, but no answer. Door's unlocked. Her cane's here, but she's not. Marcus's blood ran cold. He raced over, sirens off, heart pounding. The front door creaked open. The living room untouched. No signs of struggle, except a single piece of paper on the table. It read, Back off, or you'll bury your mama next. Within 30 minutes, every officer loyal to Marcus was mobilized. The state police were contacted. An Amber-style alert was issued, even though she wasn't a child. I don't care, Marcus told the dispatcher. That's my mother. She's 78. She's vulnerable, and she's in danger. And then, just as panic began to set in, a call came through. Private number. No trace. Marcus answered. A familiar voice. Raspy. Calm. You push this report live, and she dies. You sit quiet, and you'll get her back, no bruises. Marcus didn't speak. He just listened, then whispered, "You made one mistake." The voice chuckled. "Oh yeah, you took the wrong woman." Click. Marcus stared into the silence, then turned to his deputy. "Lock down every outbound road. Freeze every camera in town. We find her. Now." Because what the mayor's people didn't understand was, Evelyn Johnson wasn't just a mother. She was the fire that lit this revolution. And Marcus wasn't about to let that flame go out. The manhunt began before sunrise. State troopers, K-9 units, drones, all searching for a 78-year-old black woman taken in the night. But Evelyn Johnson wasn't just any woman. She was sharp, observant, quietly defiant, and she knew how to leave breadcrumbs. Inside a small, abandoned farm shed 5 miles outside Ridge Point, Evelyn sat in a chair, wrists bound with plastic ties. A single bulb buzzed above. The 2 men watching her wore masks, silent, armed, tense. They didn't speak. They just waited for orders. But Evelyn had a plan. Tucked inside her sleeve, barely visible, was the corner of a church bulletin she had taken with her that morning. It had a message written in her handwriting. "Tell Marcus I saw blue chalk." That was all. No one else would understand it. But Marcus would. Back at the command center, Marcus stared at the whiteboard, filled with maps, timelines, CCTV stills. That's when Officer Rachel Ortiz ran in holding the crumpled church bulletin. "Sir, we found this under the cushion of her pew. With this note." Marcus grabbed it. Blue chalk. His eyes lit up. "My dad used to take her fishing near the limestone trails off Route 3. She always said the soil there turned her shoes blue." He zoomed in on the map. There it was, an old farm property with limestone runoff, foreclosed for years. "She's telling us where she is." Marcus didn't wait for backup. 20 minutes later, he pulled up to the site in an unmarked SUV. No lights, no sound, just rage in his chest and fear in his throat. He spotted footprints. 2 sets, one deeper, carrying someone. He raised his radio. Suspected location confirmed. Approach silent. "I'm going in." Inside the shed, Evelyn whispered a quiet prayer. Then, a crack in the wood behind her. She held her breath. A figure appeared. Not the masked men. Not a captor. Marcus. His badge off. His gun drawn. His eyes burning. Evelyn blinked back tears. "Took you long enough, baby." Marcus smiled, even as his hands shook. "Let's get you home, Mama." Outside, backup swarmed the site. The captors were arrested. But it wasn't over. Because the man who ordered it still wore a suit, still sat in City Hall. And Marcus? He was done playing by the rules. By Monday morning, Ridge Point was no longer quiet. Every local channel, every social media feed, every diner conversation buzzed with one name. Sheriff Marcus Johnson. Because at 9 a.m., he did what no one thought he would. He held a press conference and went public with everything. Standing on the courthouse steps, Marcus looked out at a crowd of over 300 people. Neighbors, reporters, officers, families, and victims. He held up a binder labeled Ridge Point Internal Corruption, 2009 to present. And with every page he turned, he named the officers. He showed the signatures. He played the recordings. He didn't flinch. These were not isolated incidents. They were protected, promoted, and buried by the people we trusted. Then he paused, held up the check. "This is the payment made to silence a case involving my mother in 2019. It bears one signature, Mayor Paul Langston." Gasps echoed. Cameras clicked. Mics leaned in. "My mother was kidnapped because someone feared the truth. They should have feared her strength instead." That afternoon, the mayor responded. From a polished podium in City Hall, Paul Langston appeared calm, polished, and vicious. "These allegations are not only false, but dangerous. Sheriff Johnson has weaponized his office in a personal vendetta. His emotional connection to the matter makes him unfit to serve." He accused Marcus of misconduct, called for a vote of no confidence from the city council. And most shocking of all, effective immediately, Sheriff Marcus Johnson is suspended pending investigation. The town split in half overnight. One side said Marcus was out of control, a vigilante with a badge. The other said he was the only man who had ever told the truth. Murals of Evelyn Johnson's face began to appear on brick walls downtown. Signs read, "We believe Marcus. Our sheriff. Our fight. Justice for Ridge Point." But inside Marcus's home, Evelyn placed her hand gently on his shoulder. You told the truth, baby. Now let the truth fight for you. Marcus looked her in the eye. It's not over, Mama. And it wasn't, because someone inside the mayor's office was about to switch sides. It happened late at night. Marcus was sitting at his kitchen table, still in uniform, even though he was officially suspended. Stacks of files, a cold cup of coffee, and a question burning in his chest. How do you defeat a system that's already decided you're the enemy? Then, a knock at the door. It wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. Just steady. Marcus opened it slowly, gun holstered. Standing there, drenched from the rain, was Kimberly DuPont, the mayor's executive assistant. Marcus blinked. You okay? She nodded. Barely. No, but I'm ready to talk. Inside, her hands trembled as she unzipped a large manila folder. Inside were printouts, emails, calendar logs, a flash drive. She looked Marcus in the eye. I've worked under Mayor Langston for 5 years. I saw everything. Every sealed deal. Every paid-off complaint. Every time he shut down an internal review. He used community safety as a cover. Marcus didn't speak. Just listened. Watched. Then she held up the flash drive. This is a recording. 3 weeks ago, he met with Detective Keller behind closed doors. Thought no one was listening. She pressed play. A static hum. Then Langston's voice. I don't care if she's the sheriff's damn mother. I want that journal gone. I want her quiet. And if Marcus doesn't fall in line, I'll have him removed. Silence. Then Keller's voice. Want me to send a message? Langston's reply. Do whatever you have to. Just don't let it come back to me. Kimberly's eyes welled with tears. I should have come sooner. I was scared. But seeing what they did to Evelyn, I can't keep this in anymore. Marcus stood slowly. You didn't just come in time. You brought the bullet that'll bring this whole thing down. By morning, the flash drive had been duplicated. Lawyers contacted. State prosecutors notified. And that afternoon, a warrant was issued for Mayor Paul Langston's arrest. But Marcus didn't watch the arrest from the sidelines. He stood on the courthouse steps, next to Evelyn. And when the cameras turned toward him, he said only this. Justice has never been about revenge. It's about responsibility. And Ridgepoint is finally remembering what that looks like. 3 months later, the People versus Paul Langston became the most watched trial in Illinois in over a decade. Every seat in the courtroom filled. Journalists elbowed for space. And on the front row, dressed in sky blue and holding her late husband's Bible, Evelyn Johnson sat tall. Mayor Langston pled not guilty. But the evidence, thanks to Kimberly's testimony, Ortiz's courage, and Marcus's relentless digging, was undeniable. The recording, the financial trail, the pattern of buried abuse. Detective Keller, now in federal custody, turned state's witness. He confirmed everything. Langston ran the department like a puppet show. If you disobeyed, you disappeared. And then came the final day. The jury returned after just 4 hours. The foreman stood, voice steady. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice. On the charge of ordering unlawful surveillance. On the charge of authorizing intimidation and kidnapping. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. Langston's face paled. He didn't speak. But in the back row, someone whispered loud enough to be heard. Ridgepoint belongs to its people again. Weeks later, Marcus Johnson was reinstated as sheriff, unanimously. No debate. No hesitation. His first act? He renamed the community hall Evelyn Johnson Civic Center. When asked why, he simply said, because she didn't just raise a sheriff. She reminded a town how to stand tall. That fall, Evelyn gave the keynote at Ridgepoint's Unity Festival. She stood at the same podium where she'd once been threatened, ridiculed, and humiliated. And with the entire town watching, she spoke softly. They poured water on me thinking I'd shrink. But water grows roots, baby. And now y'all see. The tree stood anyway. Applause roared. People wept. Somewhere in the crowd, a young black girl looked up at Evelyn like she was sunlight. And as the sun set over Ridgepoint, you could feel something had changed. Not just the law, not just the leaders, but the soul of a town that had finally learned to listen.